Yeah, all right. So when we have polygons, and we'll also talk about the circle as well, we can talk about two measurements on the perimeter and area. So let's talk about perimeter. When I talk about the perimeter, what is it measuring there? How would you phrase it? The perimeter is the distance around it, right? The sum of all the sides. Yeah, it's the distance around a figure. Now, a little bit, we'll be watching a little bit about the units. So when we measure perimeter, well, we measure it in feet, inches, meters, kilometers. If we have a bigger type of figure, miles, so on and so forth, is how. Yeah, so they're just regular units for perimeter. Now we will have several formulas here that maybe you'll have to remember, but I would like for you to know these formulas. However, on perimeter, the formulas maybe not as important as the formulas for area, because yeah, if I've got, say, a triangle and I've got sides A, B, C, the perimeter, you're just going to add up all the sides. And it just so happens that sometimes when you have like a rectangle, and you call it L and W, length and width, the perimeter there just so happens to work into a nice formula, I guess. But you're still just adding up all the sides, right? L plus W, and then this would be L, and this would be W. So you got two L's plus two W's. So sometimes they work into some nice formulas like that, but it's still just adding up all the sides, no matter the shape. Now, one thing that I would point out, so going back to the names of polygons, let's say we've got a regular heptagon with 3 foot sides of 3 feet. What's the perimeter? What's the perimeter right there? Well, you can make this into a formula, but just using a little common sense there, it's a regular heptagon. How many sides is that? We talked about heptagons last time. Maybe not that one you're familiar with, so one of the points of it. Yeah, it's got 7 sides. Be sure you know those number of sides on those. Octagon is 8, nonagon is 9, heptagon is 7 sides. So if it's a regular heptagon, what does that mean? All sides are the same. So I've got 7 sides, and each of them's 3 feet long. That's perimeter 7 times 3, isn't it? 21 feet. Yeah, you just multiply the number of sides times the side length there. So, you can make that into a formula. Perimeter is, for a regular heptagon, the perimeter is 7s, right? For the perimeter of a regular octagon, it's 8s. But are those formulas necessary? Probably not, because you just need to know the number of sides and then the side length, and just multiply those together. All right. So that's perimeter. It's I guess the other one, if you've got a square, kind of the same thought as those regular polygons, because it's a regular polygon itself. Square's got all sides the same, so what's the, if you did a formula, what would it be for perimeter? S plus S plus S plus S, 4S. 4S. So, you know, those are, they sometimes just see those listed, but they're just adding up all the sides. Now, area, on the other hand, that measures a little something different, doesn't it? And the formulas are a little more complicated. Not too bad, though. Area, what are we measuring when we measure area? What's inside, the measure of what's inside a figure. Another way you could put it is, it's the, measuring the surface covered, or the amount of space it covers. But now, the thing about area is, okay, so units wise, well, you can't just use feet and inches because those just measure a distance. And so when you go to units, you have to use what we call the square unit, because, yeah, if I've got a figure, say it's a rectangle, when I'm measuring the area, what I'm trying to figure out is, well, for example, if this one's makes sense to do it in inches, I need to figure out how many of these square inches, so that's a square inch there. So I need to figure out how many of those square inches, you know, whatever size it is, how many of those square inches, I didn't do a good job of making it uniform there, but you see what I'm saying? You got to figure out how many of these square inches go in there. So that's the reason area units, you're doing square units. Inches squared, that's how we usually write it. Meters squared, feet squared, kilometers squared when you've got a bigger figure, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, so when you're calculating area, you're calculating how many of these little squares, or big squares, you've got kilometers squared, but square miles, you're figuring out how many of those little squares will, big squares, go in your figure. All right. Well, it turns out that basically the area formulas, I like to show anyway, all the area formulas come out of, they basically come out of the area of a rectangle. So let's talk about that. And you probably know it, but let's talk about it a little bit. So again, on a rectangle, you've got a length and a width. I like to show, I mean, you may know the formula, but I like to kind of show an example of it. All right, so let's say we've got a 2 width rectangle. The width is 2. And then the length is 3, so I can break it up into 3 parts. And so when I grid it off like that, it's easy to see that I've got square inch, let's say it's inches. I've got 6 of those square inches, don't I? 3 times 2, or 2 times, 3 times 2. And no matter, you know what, if I do a whole number anyway, let's say I got width is 3, length is 4, all right? I grid those off into the square inches, or whatever units we're using. It's always length times width, isn't it? Because this one's got 12 square inches. So, yeah, it makes sense that the area of a rectangle is length times width. You just multiply the length times the width. And so that's one of the formulas. If you don't already know, please know that one. Now, the area of a square, like I said, all of these really can come out of that area of a rectangle. area of a square, that really comes out of the area of a rectangle because your length is S. They usually call it the side length of a square S. But the width is also S because it's all the same. So what have we got? Length times width there, S times S. Or also known as S squared. Yeah, so it comes directly out of the rectangle area. Now, a couple other ones you may not be as familiar with.